Hello everyone, I'm Infinum. We're gonna try something new and I'm gonna do this patch rundown a little bit from the Yunara's perspective. So we're gonna look into like how nerfs, buffs kind of affect Yunara. But in particular, I think this patch has some pretty interesting things with the buffs on Fiend Hunter bolts and Exotics. So let's dive right into it. I'll start a little bit by saying that like anything that's non-ADC support related, it's like, well, if you're playing against them, you'd rather see them nerfed. If you're playing with them, you'd rather hope they were stronger. So we're gonna look more into how these matchups will directly affect Yunara. Ashe's buff is a little bit of an attack damage growth, means she gets a little bit stronger. I think Malphite has been super OP, so at least seeing this guy being nerfed a little bit on getting a little bit of monster damage down, having his ultimate cooldown being increased when he already builds Malignance, I think these types of things are very useful because this guy is just running around with like a 50-second cooldown late game and just stopping you from playing the game at all. So I think this nerf is really good for us Yunara players. Both Sivir and Smoller have also been really strong. I think being able to tackle down a little bit of their armor, meaning that we can have better trades when we duel into these champions, is also going to be a bit easier. Varus being buffed is, can be a little bit annoying. This guy can have a very oppressive laning phase. He's still being picked a lot in pro play, but for the intents of solo queue, he may need a little bit of win rate buff, but laning into this guy is not the most fun thing ever. And I think that's about it really for champion nerfs, but we can take a look a little bit into the items. So for example, Bundle Pipes here, I think has been a very solid support item that we really like to see on our supports, right? Because it also increases the attack speed whenever they immobilize or slow an enemy. So having supports buy this item a little bit less is kind of worse for us as Yunara players because we'd rather get that attack speed buff from our supports, right? Fiend Hunter Bolts is the highest pick rate Zeal item in both pro play and solo queue. So I think seeing this item being buffed is something that will make all of us pretty happy, right? It has a little bit of extra stats and it also gives you a little bit of extra damage with its passive, right? When you get those guaranteed crits or like the damage to be guaranteed, it seems really good. Really happy to see this one. Makes it a closer competitor to Phantom Dancer in terms of raw stats, and I'm all here for it. Another item that whenever people buy it shows really high win rates on Lolalytics, but maybe doesn't perform that well according to Riot, is Exoptics. This is a very cheap item at only 2,800 gold, so if you're using cashback and you buy this item, you're like snowballing really quickly to go on to the next item. And this one has some really nice significant changes. So like getting the extra AD will give it the same AD as you get for a shield bow. You still get the 25% crit chance as you would with a shield bow, for example, right? And now the distance required for the max damage amp is 600 instead of 700, which means it's a lot easier to trigger. And with the 600 range, it's about, if you are using Yunara's max range, right, which is 575, you're almost triggering it all the time, right? Whereas, for example, with the range they have before with 700, it's just better for like a Caitlyn or like a Jhin with a rapid fire can, that type of things, right? But as Yunara on 600 range, you can actually proc a lot of, like most of this distance required very, very often. So you can really max out some more DPS with this item. I think it looks very interesting to go for it. So what would I recommend as the current build for Yunara? So at the moment, you always start Doran's Blade, right? There's just not much to it. It's just the strongest item. If you want, you can always buy a Cull and a refillable just for that extra sustain in lane, right? And usually the big kicker is when you get to the first item, which you have 4 options kind of right now. I'd really only classify it as almost one, really. But technically, you have a few more options. So let's try to get all of them in here. So that will be Kraken Slayer. It's going to be Blade of the Ruined King. It's going to be Yuntal with its crit scaling. And somehow, Stormrazor always shows up everywhere. So Kraken Slayer would be my ideal first item choice because it's just the most stats. It gets you AD, it gets you attack speed, it gets you move speed, so you're able to kite well. And on top of it, Yunara is able to trigger the passive basically every 2 autos instead of every 3 if she's hitting multiple targets with Q. So it's just such a good item to allow Yunara to snowball. And when you have cashback already, all you want to do is be ahead of the curve in terms of items, and you're going to be very strong, and you don't need to be as worried about scaling into the late game, because if you are just an item ahead, you're just the most menacing champion on the Rift. Blade of the Ruined King is sometimes built if you need, to play against these high HP champions, and the Blade's passive is really decent into that. Also gives you a little bit of life steal, so sometimes you kind of need that sustain. You can get it via this item, although I'd recommend it a lot less than Kraken Slayer. Yunta will of course have the best scaling between all of these first items, but the issue is that you take way too long to utilize that first item spike that other champions will have, and yet you are, you know, dismissing because you didn't go Kraken Slayer instead, right? So it's a more greedier route, it's better for slower games, but in solo queue where everything is chaotic and you can get this big skirmish happening out of nowhere, Kraken Slayer I just feel like it outperforms, and when you look at the win rates usually over time, it's still favorable towards Kraken Slayer over Yuntal. And the weird option here is Stormrazor, which I think this item doesn't do that well on Yunara. I don't like the concept of this, right? Because it creates an energized attack, which is like a stronger auto. But Yunara wants to go in and, you know, and keep fighting. Stormrazor is like, you want to proc this Stormrazor hit and then leave. And then you want to proc it again and then leave and proc it again. And Yunara is like, I want to commit and I want to get the kill. And then I'm done with the trade after I've killed everything, right? So it's like, you know, it's cool to use this passive, but it's not anywhere near as useful. And the attack speed is also not as high as you'd like. On top of having a terrible build path, because you need BF sword, and then you have this crit cloak, and I think this build path is also very awkward to play towards. But it's just decent win rates. So maybe there's spots where the item is good, but I kind of can't recommend this item. But I feel like we have to talk about it. In regards to the Zeal item, Fiend Hunter Bolts is definitely the most coveted Zeal item that we should go for, especially now with the ultimate. Just try it out. The ultimate ability haste feels amazing. Whenever you use your ultimate, you will also get the cooldowns reduced on the ultimate abilities, so like the laser and the dash, right? They're both reduced as well, so you can do more lasers, more dashes if you use it a bit sooner and use it on cooldown. So that's super cool that the item allows you to do that. Next up, we have Phantom Dancer, which has the best stats of all the Zeal items, having that 65% attack speed, that 10% movement speed. It's so cracked. This item is so good. The higher elo you are, the more mastery you have on Yunara, and like the better you are at moving, kiting, attacking, all of that, the better Phantom Dancer is going to be, and allow you to do more illegal things in the game and just fight a bit better. So there's also that. He would, however, not have as much synergy with your ultimate as Fiend Hunter Bolts, but there's probably situations where you do want this item for the stat stick. And last but not least, if you're playing into like 4 melee champs, they're all like super low range, Runins is always going to feel great. It has nice wave clear scamps really nicely too. You know, it's a fun item, it feels good, but it's not as good as you'd expect in team fights, right? Like it's cool, it's fun, it's not that good compared to the other two options in my opinion, but it has its spots where it's good. So your third item is always going to be Infinity Edge, so like this. So you have first item, we have Zeal item, we have Infinity Edge. Now this is when we start to go off the rails and you start to pick your situational items based on what you see in the game. As such, Shield Bow could be like an interesting option to go for that, right? It's a cheap item, it gives you a little bit of a shield, so you know, if you're already like ahead of the curve, you get a little bit of a defensive item, but it still has your crit scaling, so it's really good for that. If you're playing against tankier compositions that require anti-heal, you can always go Mortal Reminder. If you're going against compositions that are just building a lot of armor, then you can get Lord Dominik's, and Lord Dominik's has the Giant Slayer passive back again, which is really nice. You can consider the recently buffed Hex Optics for a little bit of extra damage, but if you just want a cheaper item, right, and it also has like the extra damage with the passive change, right, it increases your range, it can be very interesting to build this item. I'm not exactly sure when you want this item over Shield Bow or over LDR or Mortal Reminder, but there's probably spots for it, and you just have to try it out, right? It's like, well, you know, I think you just have to try it out and see how it feels like. Then there's also some other options so you can survive against more bursts, like for example Maw, very good into AP burst damage like Syndra, like Echo. The only problem is if they have like a Serpent's Fang, they cut down your shield, but it can be quite good to just survive a big burst of damage and allow you to still pull through and win the fight. So Maw is pretty good against those AP champs. You can opt for more sustain heavy options like Bloodthirster, right, with the lifesteal, gives you a little shield as well. This item is amazing. There's also Gunblade that they've added this time. I'm not really sure when you'd want to play Gunblade over Bloodthirster, but you can, the options there. This one has a little bit of a slow, so maybe if you need a little bit more utility, it's also cheaper. So, you know, there's some pros and cons, but I imagine if you want like the purest, best lifesteal option with that 80 AD as well, Bloodthirster looks amazing. And on top of the other lifesteal items, Scimitar is also cool, has the 10% lifesteal, has some magic resist as well, and deactive with the cleanse is really good, right? And since ADCs just have the room for an extra slot in itemization this season, I think, you know, having that cleanser on can be really big, especially if you trust yourself to click it at the right time. And then we also have the 2 stasis items, as we can use Guardian Angel or you can use Zonius. Guardian Angel is usually a bit stronger of an item, but you can go Zonius if you want to have Seeker's value, use that first stasis, and then you upgrade to the full Zonius, get that second stasis again, and Zonius will end up being valuable for that reason. And of course, if you reach full build, you can always wrap it off with Elixir of Wrath as well. So that's kind of about it. You also have the option to look at my guide that I've done on Mobifier. It's free. You can always take a look at, you know, as it's updated, you can always click on this stuff. You can look for items, combos, things like that. You can always take a look and see if there's something in here that is of interest to you. That'll be it. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you next time. Let me know what you thought about this format in the comments. If so, you know, you can always leave a like and subscribe. That would help out the channel a lot, and I'll see you next time. Bye.